The Source by James A. Michener. Copyright 1965 by Random House Incorporated. This recording of the full-length reading of The Source was published by arrangement with Marj Productions Incorporated and was produced in 1993 by Books on Tape Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Neither this recording nor any part thereof may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authority from Books on Tape Incorporated. This book is read by Larry A. McKeever. The Tell. The Tell of Machor, at Site 1707-2584 in western Galilee, as seen by archaeologists on Sunday morning, May 3, 1964, while standing in the olive grove to the south. From the visual appearance of the Tell, nothing could be deduced as to its genesis, construction, or history, except that the uniformly smooth surface of the slope would suggest that at some time around the year 1700 BCE, it could have been paved with heavy stone blocks by Hyksos invaders moving against Egypt from the north. And the slight rise toward the eastern side of the Tell might indicate that there had once been a building of some size standing at that point. On Tuesday, the freighter steamed through the Straits of Gibraltar, and for 5 days plowed eastward through the Mediterranean, past islands and peninsulas rich in history, so that on Saturday night the steward advised Dr. Cullinane, "If you wish an early sight of the Holy Land, you must be up at dawn." The steward was Italian, and was reluctant to use the name Israel. For him, good Catholic that he was, it would always be the Holy Land. Sometime before dawn, Cullinane heard a rapping on his door, and went on deck while the stars were still bright. But as the moon fell away toward areas he had left, the sun began to rise over the land he was seeking, and the crown of stars that hung over Israel glimmered fitfully and faded. The shoreline became visible, mauve hills in the gray dawn, and he saw 3 things he knew. To the left, the white Muslim mosque of Akko, in the center, the golden dome of the Baha'i temple, and to the right, high on a hill, the brown battlements of the Catholic Carmelites. "Just like the Jews," he said, "denied religious liberty by all, they extend it to everyone." He thought that might be a good motto for the new state, but as the freighter approached land, he added, "I'd feel more like a traveler to Israel if they'd let me see one good synagogue." But the Jewish religion was an internal thing, a system for organizing life rather than building edifices, and no Jewish religious structures were visible. Even at the dockside, his introduction to the Jewish state was postponed, for the first man who recognized him was a genial, good-looking Arab in his late 30s, dressed nettily in Western clothes, who called from the shore in English, "Welcome, welcome, everything's ready." 2 generations of British and American archaeologists had been greeted with this heartening call, either by the present Jamail Tabari, or by his famous uncle Mahmud, who had worked on most of the historic digs in the area. Dr. Cullinane, from the Biblical Museum in Chicago, was reassured. For many years he had dreamed of excavating one of the silent mounds in the Holy Land, perhaps even to uncover additional clues to the history of man and his gods as they interacted in this ancient land. And as he waited for the freighter to tie up, he looked across the bay to Akko, that jewel of a seaport, where so much of the history he was about to probe had started. Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, and finally Richard the Lionheart and his Crusaders had all come to that harbor in glorious panoply, and to follow in their footsteps was, for an archaeologist like Cullinane, a privilege. "I hope I do a good job," he whispered. As soon as he cleared the papers for the ponderous amount of equipment stored in the freighter, the books, the chemicals, the photographic equipment, the little diesel locomotive, the 1,000 things a layman would not think of, he ran down the gangplank and embraced Tabari. And the Arab reported, "Things couldn't be going better. Dr. Bar-El will be here shortly. The other Americans are already dug in, and the photographer is flying down from London this afternoon." "Weather been good?" Cullinane asked. He was a lean, tall man, just entering his 40s, an Irish Catholic, educated at Harvard and Grenoble, with excavation experience in Arizona, Egypt, and the area south of Jerusalem. Under normal circumstances, it would have been unlikely for a Catholic to head such a dig, for the earlier field directors of the Biblical Museum had usually been Protestant clergymen. But the bulk of the money for this particular dig had come from a Chicago Jew who had said, "Isn't it about time we had a professional doing the work?" And Cullinane had been agreed upon, particularly since he spoke Hebrew, a little Arabic, and French. He was the crop-headed type of new scholar, solidly trained and not given to nonsense. On his departure from Chicago, loaded with gear, he had been asked by a newspaperman if he expected to dig up any records which would prove that the Bible was true. Cullinane replied, "No, we're not out to help God steady the ark." The impudent reply had been widely quoted, but when the businessman who had put up the $250,000 for the dig saw the wisecrack, he felt reassured that his money was in sober hands. "Weather's flawless," the Arab replied, speaking with the fluent ease of a man whose father had been Sir Tufik Tabari, OBE, KBE, one of the Arab leaders whom the British had trusted. Sir Tufik had sent his son to Oxford, hoping that he would want to follow him in the civil service. But the boy had from the first been enchanted by his Uncle Mahmud's work in digging up history, and his professors at Oxford had turned him into a first-rate scientific archaeologist. In the winter of 1948, when the Jews threatened to capture Palestine from the Arabs, young Jamail, then 22, had debated a long time as to what he should do. He ended by making a typical Tabari choice. He stayed in Akko and fought the Jews vigorously. Then, when his haphazard army was crushed, he announced that he would not seek asylum in Egypt or Syria. He would stay in Israel, where he had always lived, and would work with the Jews to rebuild the war-torn land. As a result of this bold decision, he found himself popular, and almost the only trained Arab available for the many archaeological excavations that were proliferating throughout the country. His presence at any site meant that the highest scientific standards would be enforced, and that good spirits would be preserved among the workmen, who said of him, "Jamail once dug 20 feet straight down, using only a camel's hair brush." As the two friends talked, a jeep squealed its brakes outside the customs area, and the driver, a petite young woman in her mid-30s, jumped out and ran past the protesting guard to give Cullinane a leaping kiss. "Shalom, John. It's so wonderful to have you back." She was Dr. Vered Bar-El, Israel's top expert in dating pottery sherds, and without her assistance, Dr. Cullinane's dig could not succeed. For she had the unusual capacity to memorize the scores of scientific reports issued during the 20th century, so that whenever someone like Cullinane or Tabari handed her a fragment of pottery, a sherd left by some household accident that had occurred 7,000 years ago, she could usually look at the piece, then summon from her extraordinary memory pieces of similar construction, found in Egypt or Jericho or Beit Mirsim. Archaeologists of 5 countries called her our walking calendar. And the commendable thing about
Sample complete. Ready to continue?